It was C.S. Lewis who said hell is the kingdom of noise. But then Lewis said something else that was a big blow to preacher types when he said, in heaven, all that is not music is silence. Music, as we have just heard this morning, is critical to our life of faith. It touches parts of us that mere prose cannot even get close to. Music can express emotions, feelings, perceptions too deep for words. The Philippians text that Janet read to us this morning is one of the earliest Christian hymns. What is the music of the text that we need to hear this morning? What would it look like for you and I to have the mind of Christ in us? Well, first let's look at what it's not. It's not looking out for number one. It reminds me of that old story of two hikers that happened upon a bear. Immediately one sat down, ripped off his hiking boots and put on his Nikes. His friend said, "You are crazy. You can't outrun that bear." And he said, "I don't have to, I just have to outrun you." To have the mind of Christ is to give up the right to think first and foremost only of ourselves. And what I want in this church. Every church I've served, and this is the 9th one I've served as an intentional interim senior minister, and I've said this to several groups already. I've had people say, oh, we need to change. We need to change a lot around here, but just don't change my stuff. Having the mind of Christ means that we're willing to let go for something greater. And we don't see ourselves in competition with others to get our way. To have the mind of Christ is to live in such a relationship with Christ that we begin to think like Christ, and we see Christ in those with whom we come into contact. The least, the lost, the marginalized, the oppressed, we stand with and for them. We recognize that sacrifice, even suffering, will result if we are faithful to the mind of Christ. We become a servant, obedient, says the text, even to the point of death. The only rivalry here is to outdo each other in honoring each other. Having the mind of Christ means that we don't have to have our way for it to be right. We can see all this most plainly in Jesus' example. He lives and breathes what he teaches. He becomes fully human. In his life and witness, we recognize that power and servanthood go together. The most powerful person ever was a servant. God's power and glory were lived out on earth even as it is in heaven. And people, when we pray the Lord's Prayer, be careful when you say those words, because you're asking for something much different than the status quo. Jesus never asked something of us that he didn't do, didn't offer himself. You know, Jesus was not killed because he told nice stories on Sunday afternoons to welcoming crowds. He was killed by the Roman government as an insurrectionist. To have the mind of Christ is to follow where He leads. This week, guess what? Jesus is headed toward the cross, reminding those of us who say Jesus is Lord that there's a cross for us. Not one that's laid on us, but one that we willingly choose to pick up. I don't know what yours is, but you, if you're a follower of Jesus, need to find it. There's a cross for us, and it's becoming increasingly obvious in our political context. It's becoming too real. Claudia Cassidy became a Christian. She'd been trained in medicine. She felt called to be a missionary doctor. She was sent to Chile, and soon after she arrived, she was arrested and placed in prison under suspicion of working for the CIA. So in her cell, she wrote this dialogue. You offered yourself freely, didn't you? Yes, of course. Well, then your offer's been accepted. But I didn't think it'd be like this. Well, what'd you think it would mean? I don't know. I thought it would mean that I would be a famous missionary doctor. Perhaps Christ doesn't want you to be a famous missionary doctor. But why? Who knows? Perhaps He wants you here among the prisoners to be Christ to them. But for 5 years? So what? Did you sign up for the short term? No. It was for always and anywhere. Then what are you complaining about? That's how to know a disciple. Not by the spiritual talk, not by the size of their Bible or the cross around their neck, but one who actually follows. How many of us have been in church most of our lives? Quite a few of us. So let me ask you some questions. How many Christian books have you read? How many Bible studies have you attended? How many lectures, dialogues, conversations about faith have you had in your lifetime? How many prayers have you prayed? How many times have you been to worship? How many sermons have you endured? I can tell you exactly how many. Do you know how many? Enough. Enough. The time is here today. It's time for action. The text says He didn't grasp at things for Himself, but rather was obedient to the point of death. Somewhere in your life is a cross of discipleship that you are invited and urged to pick up and carry. You'll have to discover and define what that is, but that is what you've been training for all these many years. It may be a cross out in the world. It may be one deep in your soul, but it's the only way to healing, wholeness, and resurrection. And until you pick it up, you're just training, not living. And God forbid that we would spend our whole life just training and never getting in the race. Those first disciples struggled. They listened to the music, but finally they picked up their crosses and followed. God help us to do the same. I hope to God that we don't merely, only listen to the music. For the music calls us to action. How about it?